But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? That'll be a comfort, one way, never to be an old woman. But then, always to have lessons to learn. Oh, I shouldn't like that. Oh, you foolish Alice, she answered herself. How can you learn lessons in here? Why, there's hardly any room for you, and no room at all for any lesson books. And so she went on, taking first one side and then the other, and making quite a conversation of it altogether. But after a few minutes she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. "Marianne, Marianne," said the voice. "Fetch me my gloves this moment." Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently the rabbit came up on the door and tried to open it. But as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved to be a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "Then I'll go around and get at the window." "That you won't," thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall, and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of the sort. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's "Pat, Pat, where are you?" And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure, then, I'm here, digging for apples, your honor." "Digging for apples, indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come help me out of this." Sounds more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Sure, it's an arm, your honor." He pronounced arm. "An arm, you goose. Who ever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window." "Sure it does, your honor, but it's an arm for all that." "Well, it's got no business there, at any rate, and go take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it, your honor, at all, at all." "Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were two little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumbling of little cartwheels, and the sound of a good many voices, all talking together, she made out. The words were, "Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't to bring but one. Bill's got the other. Bill, fetch it here, lad. Here, put him up at this corner. No, tie 'em together first. They don't reach half high enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular here. Bill, catch a hold of this rope. Will the roof bear? Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Heads below." A loud crash. "Now, who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney?" "Nay, I shan't. You do it." "That I won't, then. Bill's to go down. Here, Bill, the master says you're going down the chimney." "So Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he?" said Alice to herself. Shy, they seem to be put everything upon Bill. "I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick it a little." She drew her foot down as far down the chimney as she could and waited till she heard a little animal. She couldn't guess what sort it was, scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close above her. Then, saying to herself, "This is Bill," she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of "There goes Bill," then Rabbit's voice along, "Catch him, you by the hedge." Then silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head, Brandy, now. Don't choke him. How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us about it." Last came a little feeble squeaking voice. That's Bill, thought Alice. Well, I hardly know no more, think ye. I'm better now, but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes in at me like a jack in the box, and up I goes like a skyrocket. So you did, old fellow, said the others. We must burn the house down, said the rabbit's voice, and Alice called out as loud as she could, If you do, I'll set Dinah on you. There was a dead silence instantly. Alice thought to herself, I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off. After a minute or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, A barrelful will do if you begin with that. To begin with. A barrelful of what, thought Alice, but she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. I'll put a stop to this, she said to herself, and she shouted, You better not do that again, which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came to her head. If I eat one of those cakes, she thought, I'm sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose. So she swallowed one of the cakes, and delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house, found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle of being held up by 2 guinea pigs, who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. The first thing I've got to do, said Alice to herself as she wandered about the wood, is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan. It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea of how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. Poor little thing, said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that it must be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up in spite of all her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up the little bit of a stick, held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air off of its feet at once, in a yelp of delight, and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get a hold of it. Then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game of play with cart and horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran round the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little ways forwards each time and a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth and its eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once and ran until she was quite tired and out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet, what a dear little puppy it was, said Alice as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself and fanned herself with one of its leaves. I should have liked teaching it tricks very much, if I'd only been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I've nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see, how is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other. But the great question is what? The great question certainly was what. Alice looked all around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she did not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she had looked underneath it and on both sides of it and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeked over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large caterpillar that was sitting on top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah and taking not the smallest notice of her of anything else.